After 20 years of dedicated service, I, Eleanor Mitchell, a senior systems integration specialist, was abruptly fired via a cold, impersonal text message from my young CEO. Initially feeling deeply betrayed, disappointed, and hurt, I gradually experienced a powerful awakening, realizing my true value and strength. Soon afterward, the company's critical database system, something I'd previously warned about, collapsed dramatically. In their desperation, the same CEO who fired me was forced to beg for my return. With calmness, wisdom, courage, and professional dignity, I agreed to help, but strictly on my own terms. Eventually, I exposed severe management failures, leading to the young CEO's dismissal and the implementation of a new management model named after me, the Mitchell Framework. Instead of returning permanently to the place that betrayed me, I chose a path of genuine rebirth and discovered true freedom in a new environment where my experience and integrity were genuinely valued. My story is a journey from betrayal to success, from pain to healing and powerful transformation. Watch to the end to discover the valuable life lesson I experienced, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more inspirational stories about integrity, resilience, and finding genuine fulfillment at work. The text message that ended my 20-year career arrived quietly, casually, like canceling a dinner reservation rather than erasing 2 decades of someone's life. It was a Saturday morning in Portland, and I stood in my kitchen, the comforting aroma of freshly ground coffee filling the air, a rare moment of leisure for me, and one I'd planned to spend with my daughter, Olivia. The day felt ordinary until my phone buzzed softly against the marble countertop. I picked it up casually, expecting Olivia's message confirming our morning walk. Instead, the name Connor Hayes flashed across my screen, a name that immediately set me on edge. Connor was the 35-year-old CEO of Vanguard Systems, whose rise through the corporate ranks had been meteoric, driven more by charisma than competence, in my seasoned opinion. I tapped the message open. Eleanor, after careful review, your position has been eliminated effective immediately. Vanguard Systems is pivoting toward innovative, streamlined processes, and unfortunately, your role no longer aligns with our strategic vision. HR will contact you Monday regarding your final paperwork. Best, Connor Hayes. For a moment, time slowed. My heartbeat thudded heavily in my ears as I reread those clinical, impersonal words. It was absurd. 20 years of meticulous, quiet dedication dismissed via a casual weekend text message. My hands, usually so steady from decades of precision work with complex systems, trembled slightly. I put the phone down slowly, gripping the counter's cool edge to steady myself. It was more than disbelief, it was a deep sense of betrayal. Vanguard wasn't just my employer, it had been woven intricately into my identity. I'd guided the company's core databases from clunky infancy to powerful maturity, painstakingly designing intricate processes that safeguarded the data of millions of users, processes only I fully understood. Footsteps approached softly from behind, and Olivia appeared in the kitchen doorway. At 30, she was fiercely protective and sharply intuitive, traits she'd inherited, perhaps unfortunately, from me. She immediately noticed the tension radiating from my posture. "Mom, what's wrong?" Her voice was cautious, gentle. I hesitated, the words lodged painfully in my throat. Without speaking, I simply slid the phone across the counter toward her. Olivia read it silently, her expression shifting rapidly from confusion to shock, then settling finally into quiet anger. "They can't be serious," she breathed. Her eyes searched mine, wide with disbelief. "After everything you've done?" "They're entirely serious," I murmured, my voice steadier than I felt inside. "Connor's never really valued experience, especially mine." Memories surged forward unbidden, late nights alone in the office, double-checking code, weekends spent solving crises when less experienced managers, Connor among them, had hastily pushed updates without testing, urgent memos I had written detailing vulnerabilities, pleading for resources that had been systematically denied. Connor himself had waved off my latest warning, casually dismissing it during a board meeting last month. I'd been silenced, labeled as overly cautious, an obstacle to innovation. Now, I wondered bitterly whether his dismissal had been deliberate, a calculated step to eliminate the voice that had consistently warned against his short-sightedness. "Mom, we should fight this," Olivia said firmly, determination igniting her eyes. "It's completely disrespectful, probably illegal." I shook my head gently. "It's corporate America, Liv. Unfair, yes. Illegal, probably not, but that's not the point." "Then what is?" Her frustration crackled, clearly needing direction. "Connor doesn't yet understand what he's done," I explained calmly, feeling clarity return slowly to my mind. "He thinks I'm just some outdated liability. He doesn't realize how completely Vanguard's stability rests on the very systems and procedures he just dismissed." "You're saying they'll need you?" Olivia's voice softened, grasping the implication, more than Connor could possibly comprehend. My tone remained calm, detached, yet beneath it surged a subtle, strategic resolve. "He doesn't realize it yet, but without me, Vanguard's core database is ticking down toward disaster. And when that happens, Liv, they'll have no choice but to come back." Olivia studied me intently, gradually understanding. "Will you help them?" I let out a slow breath, considering. My mind raced with the possibilities. Revenge wasn't appealing. It felt petty beneath my dignity, but redemption, reclaiming respect, dignity, and my own worth, that appealed deeply. "I'll cross that bridge when I come to it," I said finally, picking up my coffee cup with newfound composure. "Right now, though, let's just enjoy our morning. This might be the first Saturday in 20 years when Vanguard Systems doesn't own my time." As we stepped outside moments later, the cool Oregon breeze touching my face, I felt a powerful sense of freedom beneath the initial sting of betrayal. Vanguard had betrayed me, yes, but unknowingly they'd also handed me the key to a new chapter, one where my experience would no longer be undervalued, my voice no longer silenced. Connor Hayes would soon learn a crucial lesson. There are consequences when you discard decades of wisdom as casually as an outdated smartphone, and those consequences, I thought with quiet certainty, would soon echo through every level of Vanguard Systems. For now, I simply walked beside my daughter, the path ahead clearer than it had been in years. The first few days after receiving Connor's message were surreal, each hour stretching quietly into the next as I slowly unraveled the truth I'd been avoiding for years. Without Vanguard's constant demands, time seemed abundant yet unfamiliar. It was like stepping outside after years spent locked indoors. The openness was unsettling and the possibilities endless but disorienting. Tuesday morning arrived and I sat quietly at my kitchen table, sunlight streaming gently through half-open blinds. A fresh cup of coffee steamed softly in front of me, untouched, cooling unnoticed. Across from me, Olivia had spread out papers, scribbling notes, furiously researching labor laws, drafting letters to attorneys, determined to confront injustice with all the passion of youth. But while her efforts brought warmth to my heart, my own thoughts wandered elsewhere. I'd spent 2 decades protecting Vanguard's data integrity. I knew exactly what would happen next without me there, and I found myself thinking clearly, sharply about the implications. My phone buzzed again, startling me slightly. It was my friend Linda Roberts. Linda and I had known each other almost as long as I'd been at Vanguard. At 58, she was a senior executive at Avantech, a fierce competitor to Vanguard Systems, and one of the few people in my circle who fully grasped the true depth of my professional expertise. I answered quietly, feeling a spark of something I hadn't felt in days. Possibility? "Eleanor, word travels fast in this industry," Linda began gently, her voice steady but warm. "Connor Hayes must have completely lost his mind. You okay?" "I'm okay," I assured her, stung, sure, but not entirely surprised. Linda laughed softly, knowingly. "I can imagine, but listen. Avantech has been discussing expanding our systems integration and data security team. Your name came up immediately from multiple sources. People around here know exactly who kept Vanguard's core systems secure." A small smile pulled at my lips, and I felt my spine straighten slightly, dignity flooding back. "That's reassuring to hear, Linda. It's easy to feel like 20 years vanished overnight. Nothing disappears that easily, especially not expertise," Linda replied firmly. I spoke directly with our CEO, Marcus Reed. He's extremely interested in discussing a role with you, a senior advisory position. High autonomy, proper respect for your experience, and substantial compensation. I hesitated only briefly, a lifetime habit of caution asserting itself. But beneath that caution was something stronger now, clarity. Connor's text message had fractured my trust, true, but it had also released me from Vanguard's inertia, forcing me toward a decision I'd long delayed, trapped comfortably in routine. Let's talk, I agreed calmly. I'm ready for a change. Actually, I think I've been ready for years. Perfect, Linda replied warmly. Marcus can meet you tomorrow morning. He's enthusiastic, Eleanor. And speaking candidly, I think he's eager to see Vanguard's short-sightedness turn into Avantech's opportunity. Ending the call, I glanced at Olivia, who'd paused mid-note, watching me carefully, intrigued. That sounded promising, she said, a hopeful smile forming. It is promising, I admitted, feeling a genuine optimism settle within me. It's a chance, maybe my best chance, to redefine myself professionally. Olivia closed her notebook slowly, looking directly at me. Mom, be honest. Would you even want to go back to Vanguard if they realized their mistake? I paused, considering her question carefully. Images flashed vividly. Connor's dismissive glances during meetings, his impatience with my detailed explanations of database security, the cutting of resources despite my warnings. Vanguard had not merely betrayed me through Connor's blunt dismissal. They'd betrayed every principle of thoughtful, responsible leadership that I believed in deeply. No, I replied quietly, but without hesitation. I don't think I could. Trust is hard-earned, Liv, and very easily destroyed. Vanguard broke mine completely. The only way forward now is elsewhere, somewhere my knowledge is genuinely valued. Olivia smiled, satisfied, and leaned back comfortably. Then let's make sure Avantech fully understands your value. As I prepared for my meeting with Marcus Reed that evening, carefully selecting my most professional suit and meticulously updating my resume for the first time in years, something remarkable happened. I felt a profound sense of relief. For decades, my identity had been so intertwined with Vanguard that I'd nearly forgotten my worth extended far beyond those office walls. Connor's betrayal, painful as it was, had awakened me to the deeper reality that my career and indeed my entire self-worth wasn't defined by any single company, but rather by the expertise, integrity, and experience I brought to the table wherever I chose to be. By the time I walked into Avantech's sleek, modern offices the next morning, shaking Marcus Reed's hand firmly, I was no longer Eleanor Mitchell, the discarded Vanguard veteran. I was Eleanor Mitchell, respected expert, newly freed, ready to write my next chapter on my own terms. A month after leaving Vanguard Systems, I was settling into my new advisory role at Avantech. The pace at Avantech was different, less frantic, more deliberate. Marcus Reed, the CEO, genuinely valued my input, often stopping by my office for informal conversations, appreciating the depth of experience I brought. For the first time in years, I felt seen and respected. Then, on a cold Wednesday morning, my phone erupted in a flurry of messages. I'd been preparing notes for a strategic meeting when Olivia's urgent text popped onto my screen. Mom, have you checked the news? Vanguard's database crashed. It looks really bad. My heart skipped slightly, a familiar tight sensation gripping my chest. I quickly opened a news app. Headlines flashed urgently. Major data outage at Vanguard Systems threatens millions of customers. Another read bluntly, Vanguard faces multi-million-dollar loss in catastrophic system failure. I sat back, exhaling slowly, processing the news. The disaster I had predicted and repeatedly warned Connor about had finally happened. I vividly recalled my final meeting with him, the one where he brushed aside my cautions about cutting corners and downsizing critical technical staff, arrogantly confident in his own misguided approach. I was still scanning headlines when my phone rang, the caller ID reading Connor Hayes. A sharp pang of irritation rippled through me. I paused, allowing it to ring twice more before finally answering, my voice carefully neutral. This is Eleanor. Eleanor, thank God you picked up. Connor's voice trembled, a stark contrast to his previous dismissive arrogance. You've probably heard by now? I've seen the news, I replied calmly, refusing to match his panic. He hesitated, clearly struggling to swallow his pride. Our entire customer database is inaccessible. Aaron Blake's team has spent the last 24 hours working non-stop, but we can't pinpoint the issue. It's catastrophic, Eleanor. Millions in transactions frozen, customers panicking. I imagined Connor pacing his lavish corner office, the confidence he wore like expensive cologne evaporating by the second. You realize this was entirely avoidable, Connor, I said softly, matter-of-factly. No malice in my tone, just truth. I specifically warned you and Aaron about the instability in the updated protocols and the risk you were taking by pushing changes without proper oversight. There was a painful silence on the other end. Connor's voice, when it returned, was quieter, humbled. Eleanor, look, I know this isn't ideal, but the board asked me to reach out personally. We need you, desperately. Name your price, your terms, just please help. I let the request hang in the air, savoring the irony briefly. Connor Hayes, who had dismissed 20 years of my work as obsolete, was now pleading for precisely that expertise. I'll consider it, I finally responded, my voice even, but under my conditions, not yours. Absolutely, he agreed hastily. Whatever you need. I'll need full autonomy, I said clearly. Direct reporting line to Richard Thompson on the board, bypassing your team entirely. And Connor, my consulting fee won't be discounted. He hesitated slightly, then surrendered with quiet resignation. Agreed? When can you get here? Within the hour, I said firmly, ending the call. As I collected my things, Marcus appeared at my office doorway, clearly aware of the unfolding crisis. You heading to Vanguard? He asked gently, his expression knowing. I am, I replied, meeting his gaze honestly, but not to save Connor's career, only because millions of innocent people depend on that system. Customers who trusted Vanguard and employees who deserve better leadership. Marcus nodded slowly, thoughtfully. Integrity suits you, Eleanor. Remember, we're here for you when you're ready to come back. I smiled gratefully, feeling a quiet strength rise inside me. For once, the decision was entirely mine, guided by principles, not obligation. Arriving at Vanguard an hour later felt strangely surreal. Employees watched me pass, a mix of awe, relief, and guilt etched clearly across their faces. As I stepped into the main conference room, I saw Connor and Aaron Blake waiting nervously. Aaron, the ambitious young engineer hired to replace me, couldn't meet my gaze. Connor stepped forward, extending his hand awkwardly, clearly uncertain whether I'd accept the gesture. After a moment's pause, I shook it briefly, purely professional. Welcome back, Eleanor, he mumbled, his voice barely audible. Let's get straight to work, I said calmly, turning immediately toward the projection screens displaying endless lines of error codes and panicked system alerts. As I quickly reviewed the chaos unfolding across Vanguard's network, a wave of clarity washed over me. This crisis was the inevitable consequence of Connor's arrogance and Aaron's naive confidence in untested shortcuts. But beneath that knowledge was something deeper, more powerful, the certainty that my true value lay not in my ability to return Vanguard to its former stability, but in the dignity and resolve with which I chose to act in this moment of crisis. I took a seat confidently at the head of the table, commanding quiet attention. Then, calmly, deliberately, I began to speak, outlining precisely how we would move forward. Stepping back into Vanguard's offices felt surreal, as though I'd returned to a once familiar home, only to find everything subtly changed. The fluorescent lights seemed harsher, the silence denser, the air heavy with tension. I moved purposefully, passing familiar faces who nodded briefly, their expressions a complicated blend of gratitude, guilt, and apprehension. A young assistant quickly ushered me into the main conference room, where the technical team had gathered anxiously around cluttered tables, screens flickering with endless streams of data and error messages. Connor stood at the far end of the room, his arms crossed tightly, face pale. Beside him stood Aaron Blake, his shoulders hunched defensively. When they saw me, Connor uncrossed his arms stiffly and moved forward, uncertainty visible in his every gesture. "Eleanor, thank you again," he began awkwardly, clearing his throat. "We've been struggling here." "I can see that," I said gently but firmly, moving past him towards the main console, deliberately taking charge. I knew the systems intimately, their idiosyncrasies, vulnerabilities, and hidden strengths, and I immediately saw the scope of their current chaos. "Explain exactly what happened," I directed Aaron, my voice neutral and professional. Aaron swallowed hard, avoiding my gaze. "We pushed a major update to streamline data retrieval. It worked in tests, but you skipped full-scale stress testing," I finished for him, not judgmentally, just stating facts. Aaron nodded mutely. I glanced briefly at Connor, who avoided my eyes completely. "I warned you both about this exact scenario," I said calmly, without accusation. "You compromised redundancy protocols to accelerate deployment. Now your databases are locked in cascading system failures exactly as I predicted." Connor finally spoke, his voice strained and defensive. "We were under enormous pressure, Eleanor. Deadlines were critical, shareholders impatient." I raised my hand gently, silencing him. "Pressure isn't an excuse to neglect fundamentals, Connor. That was your critical mistake." I shifted my attention back to the technical team, who watched intently, awaiting direction. "I'll need immediate system access and every recent changelog. Also, bring me copies of the disaster recovery protocols. I designed the originals before your recent modifications." Within moments, screens filled with documents. I worked rapidly, retracing each step, untangling errors and analyzing logs that showed exactly where and how the failures occurred. As I immersed myself in the familiar rhythm of analysis and repair, my concentration deepened, blocking out all distractions. Hours slipped by unnoticed. Eventually, I uncovered the critical failure, a compromised update that Aaron's team had hastily implemented. It had created a hidden loop, slowly corrupting layers of database integrity until the entire system collapsed under peak load. Clearly, the mistake was amateurish yet devastating. "Here it is," I announced quietly, stepping back slightly, allowing Connor and Aaron to see the screen. Aaron's eyes widened in recognition, his cheeks flushing crimson. "I'm sorry, Eleanor," Aaron whispered. "I didn't see this. I was careless." Connor's jaw tightened, his embarrassment clear, yet his voice remained defiant. "We're here now, aren't we? Can you fix it or not?" I met his gaze steadily, ignoring the provocation. "Yes, I can, but it'll take time you barely have. We'll need to rebuild certain protocols from scratch, revert several systems, and isolate corrupted data." Connor's eyes flashed with irritation. "Just patch it for now. Fix it quickly?" "No," I replied calmly, resolutely. "That's exactly what caused this disaster in the first place. Shortcuts have consequences. If you want my help, we'll do it right. Properly, thoroughly, and transparently." Connor opened his mouth to argue but stopped abruptly, clearly realizing his position left no room to negotiate. Finally, with resignation, he nodded. "Fine, do it your way." "Good," I replied softly. Turning back to the team, I calmly outlined the restoration plan, assigning precise tasks. Soon, the engineers, energized by clear direction, dispersed efficiently, relief evident on their faces. For the first time in hours, optimism replaced anxiety in the room. As I paused briefly, sipping cold water, Richard Thompson, the chairman of the board, appeared quietly at the door. At 62, Richard carried quiet authority effortlessly. His presence shifted the room's atmosphere immediately. "Eleanor, a quick word," he said gently. I nodded, stepping into the hallway with him. Richard looked genuinely troubled. "I want you to know, Eleanor, that the board deeply regrets how things unfolded. We're aware now that warnings were overlooked. I've already begun a full internal review." I considered him carefully, sensing sincerity. "Richard, I appreciate the acknowledgement, but please understand, I'm not here seeking an apology or revenge. My concern is the integrity of the data and the people Vanguard serves." He nodded slowly, respect clear in his eyes. I understand. Still, the board will need your input. I suspect changes will be necessary. I'll provide whatever insights you need, I assured him calmly. But my future lies elsewhere. Richard smiled slightly, nodding. Understood. We're grateful regardless. Returning to the control room, I felt strangely empowered by that brief interaction. It wasn't vindication that drove me, but rather the reaffirmation of my values. I resumed my work, methodically restoring Vanguard's stability, fully aware my actions wouldn't merely repair systems, they would reinforce a lesson Connor, Aaron, and perhaps even the entire company had overlooked for too long. Experience, integrity, and thoroughness aren't luxuries, they're necessities. 2 days later, after countless hours meticulously repairing Vanguard's shattered databases, the systems began to stabilize. The immediate crisis had eased, and the team around me visibly relaxed, gratitude clear in their exhausted eyes. Yet beneath this relief, I knew a deeper reckoning loomed. I had received an email earlier that morning from Richard Thompson, inviting me to an emergency meeting of Vanguard's board of directors to discuss the recent crisis. As I stepped into the sleek conference room on Vanguard's executive floor, I felt all eyes turn sharply toward me. The board members, stern-faced executives in dark suits, sat silently around the polished mahogany table. Connor sat at the far end, his expression guarded, arms crossed tightly. Beside him, Aaron stared blankly at his tablet screen, avoiding eye contact. Richard Thompson rose slightly, gesturing politely toward an empty seat at his right. Eleanor, please join us. I nodded courteously, taking my seat calmly. Richard cleared his throat, his voice resonating with authority. We're here today to determine how and why our database systems collapsed so catastrophically, causing severe financial losses and irreparable damage to our reputation. Connor shifted uncomfortably in his seat. As CEO, I take ultimate responsibility, he began, feigning humility. However, our technical team was tasked clearly with ensuring updates were safe. Aaron's team assured me they were ready. Aaron visibly bristled, suddenly alert. Connor, that's not entirely fair. You pressured us repeatedly to deploy the update without full-scale testing. I voiced concerns, and Eleanor explicitly warned us multiple times. Connor shot him an icy glare. Let's stick to facts, Aaron. You assured the executive team the system was ready. Aaron glanced helplessly toward me, realizing Connor intended to scapegoat him completely. Richard interrupted calmly, addressing me directly. Eleanor, as the expert who resolved this issue, we need your assessment. Where exactly did this go wrong? I paused briefly, gathering my thoughts carefully. The system failed due to a compromised software update, one that bypassed multiple safety protocols I had previously established. These protocols required full stress testing and redundancy measures. Both were deliberately disregarded. I tapped calmly on my laptop, projecting onto the conference screen several emails, their timestamps unmistakably clear. These messages detail explicit warnings I sent directly to Connor Hayes and Aaron Blake 3 months ago, urging them not to proceed without rigorous testing. Connor personally dismissed my warnings, stating, and I quote, "Your caution is outdated and unnecessary." Connor's jaw clenched tightly, color draining from his face as murmurs spread around the table. Richard frowned deeply. Connor, is this accurate? Connor hesitated, visibly struggling. I may have underestimated the risks involved, yes, but I interrupted gently, yet firmly. There's more. In the weeks following my departure, additional emails from Aaron's team to Connor repeatedly expressed concerns that systems weren't adequately tested. Connor responded by instructing Aaron to prioritize timelines over thoroughness. And I displayed another email clearly highlighting Connor's instruction, undeniable in its directness. Proceed immediately, testing can wait, delays are unacceptable. Richard's expression darkened significantly. Connor, this is profoundly troubling. You put short-term appearances ahead of long-term security? Connor stammered, clearly cornered. I made a judgment call. I believed we could manage the risk. You gambled, Richard corrected sharply, and you lost spectacularly. He turned decisively toward me. Eleanor, had your warnings been heeded, would this crisis have been averted? Without question, I confirmed clearly, maintaining steady eye contact. Those protocols were built from 20 years of experience precisely to prevent disasters like this. Connor ignored experience for expedience. Connor sank lower into his seat, defeated, while Aaron, finally feeling vindicated, exhaled slowly. The board members exchanged somber glances. Richard leaned back thoughtfully. Given this information, it's clear the failures here were primarily managerial rather than technical. He looked directly at Connor. Effective immediately, the board suspends your authority pending a full internal review. Aaron, your role will be reassessed, but your honesty today is noted. Connor stared blankly ahead, disbelief mixing with anger. Yet no protest came. Richard then turned gently toward me. Eleanor, I deeply regret how you were treated. Vanguard owes you an apology and our gratitude. Moving forward, we would appreciate your guidance in overhauling our management practices to ensure this never happens again. I nodded graciously. I'll gladly advise you, Richard, but my future commitments lie with Avantech. Vanguard must learn to rely on careful planning and respect for experience, not merely reactive solutions. Richard smiled appreciatively, nodding in understanding. Agreed entirely. And as a gesture of acknowledgement, we intend to adopt a new management framework, one built on your original principles. We'd like to name it the Mitchell Framework. I felt a wave of quiet pride and deep vindication. I'm honored. The meeting adjourned shortly afterward. As everyone dispersed, Connor lingered behind, approaching me cautiously. His earlier arrogance had vanished, replaced entirely by humiliation. Eleanor, he began softly, almost inaudibly. For what it's worth, I was wrong. Deeply wrong. I should have listened. I regarded him steadily, feeling neither anger nor sympathy, just a clear, peaceful resolve. Connor, I hope this teaches you humility. The people you lead deserve that. Leaving Vanguard's building that afternoon, I felt lighter than I had in years. Connor's actions had forced me onto a new path, one that reaffirmed my worth, expertise, and dignity. The Mitchell Framework would soon ensure Vanguard never repeated its mistakes born from arrogance, mistakes I had quietly predicted. Stepping into the sunlight, I knew my true victory wasn't just professional vindication, it was the realization that wisdom, integrity, and calm strength could triumph even after the harshest betrayals. In the days following that decisive board meeting, Vanguard Systems underwent an immediate transformation. The atmosphere within the company shifted profoundly, from tense uncertainty to cautious optimism. With Connor Hayes removed from his position pending further review, Richard Thompson swiftly stepped in, steering the organization towards stability and transparency. One evening, as I sat quietly in my office at Avantech, my phone rang. The caller ID displayed Richard's name. Richard, I answered, leaning back comfortably in my chair. Eleanor, he greeted warmly. I wanted to personally inform you that the internal investigation has concluded. The board has officially terminated Connor's position as CEO. We've also made substantial changes in our management structure. That's good to hear, I replied sincerely, feeling a deep sense of relief, not vindictive pleasure, but genuine satisfaction at seeing justice served. I assume you've also reevaluated Aaron's role? Yes, Aaron has been reassigned to a supervised technical role, Richard explained. We recognize he acted under pressure. He'll have the chance to redeem himself, but he'll be carefully guided. I nodded, even though Richard couldn't see me. Fair enough. And what about the broader changes we discussed? Richard paused meaningfully, clearly pleased with the news he was about to deliver. The Mitchell Framework is now official company policy. Your original protocols, along with your detailed recommendations from this crisis, will be implemented immediately and comprehensively. The board unanimously agreed that the only way forward is through the values and expertise you advocated. A quiet pride stirred in me, tempered by humility. I'm honored, Richard, truly, thank you. No, Eleanor, Richard insisted gently. It's Vanguard that owes you thanks and an apology. You showed us that wisdom and integrity are more valuable than short-term gains. We won't forget that lesson again. Our conversation ended warmly, leaving me reflective. As I stood and gazed through the window at the bustling evening traffic below, I realized how much the recognition meant not for my ego, but because it validated the core values I'd upheld quietly for 2 decades. 2 days later, an official announcement appeared in leading industry publications, publicly acknowledging Vanguard's missteps and explicitly citing the adoption of the Mitchell framework. Overnight, the news triggered extensive discussion online and within professional circles. My phone filled with congratulatory messages from former colleagues, industry leaders, and even some surprised journalists. Olivia called immediately after reading the news, excitement clear in her voice. "Mom, did you see it? Everyone is talking about the Mitchell framework. Your name is everywhere." I laughed softly, genuinely pleased by her enthusiasm. "Yes, Liv, I have seen it. It feels good to see the right values recognized." "More than good, it's amazing." Olivia's voice was vibrant. "After everything they put you through, your experience and integrity won out." "That's usually the way it goes," I replied softly, thoughtfully. "In the short term, shortcuts can be seductive, but in the long run, true professionalism always shows its worth." Later that afternoon, Marcus Reed stopped by my office holding a printed copy of the announcement. He smiled broadly as he placed it gently on my desk. "Eleanor, Avantech is incredibly fortunate to have you. Seeing Vanguard publicly embrace your expertise is validation, not just for you, but for our entire philosophy." "Thank you, Marcus," I responded gratefully. "Though to be honest, validation from you and Avantech's culture means even more." He chuckled warmly. "I'm glad to hear it, and if it's not too presumptuous, we'd love your input in drafting something similar for Avantech. Your voice should shape our approach too." "Of course," I agreed without hesitation. "I'd be happy to." As he left, I felt profoundly grateful, not merely for the recognition Vanguard had finally granted, but for the deeper justice it represented. Connor's dismissal wasn't simply about punishment. It was about accountability, a necessary acknowledgement of values that had been dangerously forgotten. Before leaving my office that evening, I took a final glance at the printed announcement on my desk. My eyes lingered over the words Mitchell Framework, feeling a quiet satisfaction. It wasn't about personal pride. It was the understanding that Vanguard's mistake had become an opportunity for lasting positive change, ensuring the company would never again disregard the wisdom experience brought. Stepping outside into the fresh evening air, I felt genuinely free from resentment, free from betrayal, and free to embrace the future fully. Justice had been served, integrity had triumphed, and my professional reputation, once quietly ignored, had now become a guiding standard within the very organization that had so casually dismissed it. In the end, my vindication wasn't rooted in Connor's downfall, but in the lasting lesson that true value lies not in power or position, but in unwavering integrity, professional respect, and the quiet strength of wisdom earned through experience. Life has an extraordinary way of revealing clarity after chaos. After the whirlwind at Vanguard Systems, I didn't just step into a new job at Avantech. I stepped into a new version of myself, not reinvented exactly, but fully realized. It began with subtle moments, meetings where Marcus Reed asked earnestly for my perspective, pauses when younger engineers sought out my guidance, not from obligation, but genuine respect. Bit by bit, my voice grew stronger, more certain, finding its natural resonance in a company that valued experience, integrity, and honesty. One morning, as sunlight gently warmed the Avantech conference room, Marcus approached me with an envelope, a quiet smile playing across his lips. "Open it," he encouraged softly. Inside was a formal letter announcing my appointment to Chief Systems Advisor, a role tailored specifically around my strengths and vision. Beneath the formalities was Marcus's handwritten note. "Eleanor, you showed us what authentic leadership truly is, humble, strong, principled. We'd be honored to have you guide our path forward." I paused, absorbing the magnitude of that moment, not because of the position itself, but because it was recognition I hadn't chased, validation I no longer desperately needed. Instead, it was recognition freely offered, genuine and heartfelt. It made all the difference. My influence soon extended beyond Avantech. Invitations came regularly for conferences, panels, and guest lectures. At first, I hesitated, cautious about revisiting past wounds, but I soon realized something important. My story wasn't defined by betrayal anymore. Instead, it had become a powerful narrative of resilience and rediscovery, one I felt compelled to share openly. At an industry-wide cybersecurity forum in Seattle, I took the stage in front of hundreds of executives, young engineers, and future leaders. Standing before them, I didn't feel nervous. I felt calm, purposeful. I'm not here today to discuss what was taken from me, I began, meeting their eyes steadily. I'm here to talk about what I've gained. The auditorium quieted, attention fixed firmly. We often confuse loyalty with silence, I continued. We stay silent when we see shortcuts, when we witness arrogance, assuming silence protects stability. But true stability comes from accountability, integrity, and the courage to speak up even when it costs us. That courage might temporarily disrupt our lives, but it also reveals our true value. Applause broke out spontaneously, genuine and warm. Afterwards, dozens of young professionals approached, eager to thank me, to ask for advice, or simply share their own experiences. One young woman stepped forward timidly. I just wanted to say thank you, she began. I'm facing something similar at work, pressure to take shortcuts. Your story gave me the strength I need to speak up. Her words struck deeply. That moment crystallized the purpose of everything I'd endured. My experience wasn't just personal anymore, it had become communal, a lesson for others to carry forward. Weeks later, a handwritten note appeared in my mailbox at Avantech. The handwriting immediately recognizable, neat, careful, and contrite. Eleanor, I know I'm probably the last person you expected to hear from, but I had to write. Losing your guidance at Vanguard was my greatest professional mistake. You taught me that real leadership listens, respects experience, and values integrity above ambition. I'm trying to become that kind of leader now. Thank you for being an example even when I didn't realize I needed one. Respectfully, Connor Hayes. Holding the note, I felt no bitterness. Instead, a quiet compassion took hold. Connor's arrogance had been costly, yes, but he was learning, growing. That too was part of the legacy I'd unknowingly built. Time flowed gently onward, each day at Avantech filled with meaningful work, respectful collaboration, and purpose-driven leadership. Olivia visited often, and our conversations deepened. We discussed career, resilience, ethics, and the quiet power of dignity in the face of injustice. My daughter had watched closely, absorbing not just what I said, but how I chose to respond to challenges. One evening, sharing dinner at our favorite little restaurant downtown, Olivia raised her glass with a gentle smile. To rebirth, Mom, she said warmly. To a life where your value is never in question again. I smiled back softly, our glasses touching gently. To rebirth and to freedom. Driving home later, I reflected deeply, streets bathed in a soft glow. My journey hadn't been about proving others wrong or waiting for validation. It had become a journey about proving myself right. Right to trust my instincts, right to stand by my principles, and right to reclaim the power that I'd quietly surrendered for years. When I arrived home, I lingered outside beneath the clear Oregon night sky, stars scattered gently overhead. I breathed deeply, fully at peace, finally understanding the truth I'd long overlooked. Real freedom isn't simply leaving a difficult place. It's reaching a state where the judgments of others no longer define you. Connor's text message hadn't ended me. In many ways, it had given me the greatest gift of my career. It forced me to reclaim myself completely and authentically. That night before bed, I opened a notebook, blank pages staring back gently. I wrote softly, clearly, a quiet promise to myself. Never again will I allow my worth to be dictated by someone else's limited perception. My value is innate, unwavering, undeniable, not because someone else says so, but because I have finally recognized it myself. Closing the notebook gently, I felt a profound stillness. For the first time in years, I belonged fully, beautifully, and completely to myself. Thank you all for watching this video. Please comment and let me know what you think about this story. Please like and subscribe to watch more great content on my channel.